With no way to continue living with his mother, the boy thought he could live in an abandoned house. But what he found there changed his life. James was a boy of just 10 years old who suddenly found himself in a very difficult situation. His mother would come home early from work, as usual, carrying a load of beer. She would drink all the cans in one night. When she couldn't buy any, she would go to a cupboard in the kitchen and take out a liter of vodka, which she saved for what she called emergencies. With beer, she became sluggish, sleeping on the couch. With vodka, it was worse, much worse. She became aggressive, yelling at her son, hardly understanding what the boy responded, and then she wouldn't sleep. It was more like passing out. Sometimes on the couch, sometimes on the hallway floor. Occasionally, James would wake up in the middle of the night to noises in the bathroom. It was his mother throwing up her lunch. Hillary was a troubled woman. There were days when she would send her children out of the house so she could be with her new boyfriend, a rough-mannered man and drug user who didn't like any children at all. It was a very difficult situation for James because he had nowhere to go, ending up in squares, woods, walking the streets until after sunset. He would return home very hungry and never see a meal waiting for him. Sometimes, he would make his own snacks and his mother's. James was very afraid of being abandoned by his mother, but he continued to be strong and brave, even though he knew that living in that house was a constant risk. He knew that his mother's boyfriend could be a threat. One day, upon entering, a man grabbed his arm tightly and pointed a knife at him, asking the boy what he was doing there and why he hadn't left yet. James was terrified and lost his voice for a moment, but he tried not to cry. His mother saw the scene and did not intervene. James didn't know if it was because she was also afraid of her boyfriend or if she was so drunk that she didn't understand what was happening. He just lowered his head and went to his room, praying for the man to leave soon. During the night, he realized that living there was like being trapped in a prison with his own mother and her boyfriend. James then packed some clothes and a few belongings in a school backpack and walked the city streets, trying to find a place where he could at least spend the night. He found a secluded little house that was falling apart. He was afraid to open the window and have it fall on his feet, but decided to go in and see if it was possible to find a corner to spend the night and protect himself a little from the cold. Upon entering, he noticed that despite being deteriorated on the outside, it was quite habitable inside and hardly any wind blew. In one of the rooms, he found some old cardboard boxes that served as a bed, and that's how James made it through that day of such distressing feelings. He was sad, dejected, and hungry. Sleeping would be the best thing he could do, and that house would serve as his fortress for the next few days. In fact, he had no idea what to do or what would happen. The next morning, he was able to explore the house more carefully. He found so many cardboard boxes in the back that he could earn some money by selling them for recycling, maybe even get himself a simple meal. As he prepared the boxes he would exchange for money, he found one still sealed. He shook it and realized that there was something inside. His curiosity was enormous, so he began tearing the tape quickly to find out what was inside that box. James was so surprised that he could hardly believe what he saw. Upon opening the box, he took out a large amount of money. The boy was scared and happy at the same time, wondering how someone could have forgotten all that money there. Would they come back to look for it? So James decided that he would leave the money in a safe place, but would stay alert to make sure no one came looking for it. But since he had not a single penny in his pocket, he took out some notes from the amount he found there to satisfy his hunger. It was almost noon when he went to the nearest snack bar to have his first meal after fleeing his mother's house. He ordered a hamburger with French fries and a soda. Then he ate a sweet pie from McDonald's. James was really hungry, and that was the best meal he had had in years. Then he went through the city center, ended up buying some fruits to eat during the rest of the day. While he was at the fruit stand, he bumped into an elderly couple who noticed how alone that young man must be in life. His clothes were wrinkled and still lightly covered in dust. The couple felt sorry for him and wanted to know where his parents were. James told the whole story, leaving the two elderly deeply moved. They looked at each other and spoke quietly for a minute. Then they said that it wasn't right, that James shouldn't be alone on the street or in an abandoned house. So, the couple invited the boy to at least spend some time at their house. They said they were already elderly and had never had children. They lived alone, a bit far from the city, and they would have space for James. The boy thought he had nothing to lose, and the two elderly people seemed like calm individuals who really wanted to help. So, he accepted the invitation, ran back to the abandoned house to grab the backpack with clothes and the money. He returned to hide in another room of the place, and planned to come back every day to see if anything had changed or if he found someone. The move to the couple's house was quite smooth indeed. The two were normal people who just wanted to help and provide some comfort to the boy. As they were retired and didn't have many obligations at home, they were always going back to the city to buy something or just to pass the time. Whenever they went to the center, James took the opportunity to run to the abandoned house. Everything was always in the same way as he had left it. 2 months later, the money was still where he had hidden it. The box was in the same position as always, so James thought that whoever had left that amount hidden wouldn't come back to look for it. He put all the notes in his backpack and went back home, where he now lived with the two elderly, but he didn't say anything to either of them about what he had discovered on his first night alone. He found a place in his room that would be a perfect hiding place. The rest of James's days were quite normal, going to school, helping the elderly at home, eating what they ate, going for walks with them, and not having to worry about coming home and suffering any kind of threat or violence. When he woke up at night, there were no noises of people feeling sick in the bathroom, and he even forgot the smell of alcohol that his mother's vodka bottles left around the house. It was a simple life, but he felt that he was with people who cared about him. The two elderly people grew fond of the boy, and he was smart, polite, and didn't cause trouble. He did his homework, ate well, and seemed not to mind living with two elderly people. The couple hoped that, at some point, the biological mother would knock on the door or some authority from the municipality, but that never happened, as far as they knew. James hadn't gone after her. However, James always prayed before going to bed and always asked God to rid his mother of the beer and vodka bottles, and the bad people who were after her. Even though he always seemed to be a cheerful boy, at home and at school, inside he felt the pain and responsibility of having abandoned his own mother. Sometimes, during the happy moments, he remembered that, and then stopped laughing immediately. He didn't know if he had done the right thing, but he had done something to avoid something worse. He found out that when he studied hard or read an interesting book, these negative thoughts never bothered him. That's why James immersed himself in books and study materials. From an ordinary student without much shine, he became one of the best in the class, the type that was noticed by teachers in most subjects. James turned 18 and had already finished high school. He never heard from his biological mother again and didn't think much about the subject anymore. He ended up being adopted by the elderly couple with whom he developed a strong relationship of complicity and friendship. They were his real family. As he continued to be an excellent student, he thought about taking the medical school entrance exam. What he wanted most was to help other people in difficulty in some way, just as he had been helped when he needed it most. So James talked to his adoptive parents and told them his desire to study medicine. The couple found it very noble of him and were sure that he would have many chances of being accepted into the course. The problem was that medical school was very expensive. They couldn't afford that expense. They said they regretted not being rich and having a simple life, and that even a loan from the bank would be difficult, as they were of advanced age. But James said they shouldn't worry or apologize for anything. After all, he might have the solution. So, he told them that shortly before being welcomed, he had found a huge amount of dollars in a box, and all that money was still hidden in his room. The couple were speechless when the young man brought the amount to them. It was much more money together than any of them had ever seen. James said that when he was a child, he was afraid to talk about that subject because he thought the couple would think he had stolen from someone or somewhere, and then he would no longer have their sympathy or trust. On the other hand, he was afraid that they would find out that he had kept all the value and threaten his new family. So, he preferred to leave the money just stored away. But it had been 8 years, no one showed up asking about it, and James knew he had a good reason to finally use those dollars. The couple helped the boy count how much money there was, and they found that it was more than enough to pay for medical school. The young man immediately set aside the part for university, and the rest he handed over to his adoptive parents. "This is for you who gave me a home, food, and love. I already have what I need," he said. The elderly were surprised by that gesture. They didn't want the boy to reward them for the good deed of years ago, but they were really pleased that, over all those years, the boy had managed to keep that money hidden, just waiting for the right time to use it for his own good. James then entered medical school and managed to finance all expenses on his own. His adoptive parents continued to live normally without having to take out loans from the bank to help their son, or to struggle with monthly bills to keep him studying. Being a doctor was indeed the boy's dream, and he was doing everything in his power to get there. Several years ago, that boy who had to flee from home and his own mother was now a grown man and answered to the title of Dr. James. He began to work night shifts and get to know the reality of an emergency room, the drama of families, and how important his profession is for those people who came to him weakened and in need of help. Sometimes, there were emergency treatments in the middle of the night. He showed his worth as a professional and as a human being and was soon hired by a major hospital in the city. Nevertheless, he didn't stop, at least once a week, to take night shifts. James hadn't revealed this to any other doctor, but he had asked the reception staff to inform, and whenever a young or elderly homeless person came to the emergency room needing care, he would be happy to attend to them. One dawn, a woman around 50 years old arrived with symptoms of intoxication. When James entered the room to assess the case, he brought his hands to his mouth as soon as he saw the patient. She looked very different. She didn't seem to be just 50 years old. She seemed to be at least 60, but she was his biological mother. Now, she was there, all worn out and in urgent need of help to avoid an overdose. James felt a slight dizziness. Her case was critical, and she would need an urgent compatible blood transfusion. Now, James saw himself in a dead end. He would need to help the person who never protected him and who, all these years, didn't look for him. Or she would die right there in front of him. James realized he wouldn't gain anything by being selfish. It was the woman who gave him life needing help. Now it was time to give her life too. The team composed itself and began to treat the woman, administering injections, measuring her blood pressure and heart rate. He went to the hospital administration and told them that his mother was the patient and that he could donate the blood she needed, in addition to covering all the costs of the procedure. As James was a doctor beloved by the team, everyone mobilized to expedite the treatment. It wasn't easy to achieve a stable condition, but after many hours of procedures, he managed to get the mother out of the risk zone of death. To aid in her recovery, the still unconscious woman was transferred to a private ward where she would have better care. James's shift had ended hours ago, and the sun was already shining high in the sky. But the young doctor decided to stay there until he was sure she would be fine. It was almost noon when she woke up and managed to eat something. James entered the room with a bouquet of flowers and asked her how she felt. The woman said she was confused and didn't remember much, but they were in the hospital because she must have been very ill. James said that it was a very close call, and she urgently needed to take more care or perhaps take another direction in life. The woman looked deep into the doctor's eyes, and for a moment, James thought she had recognized him. But the woman started crying and said she didn't know what to do anymore. She drank and filled herself with pills because she had been a terrible mother and a very bad person. Now, all she wanted was to be able to forget everything she did and everything she lost in life. Then she said that she once had a son, but she didn't know where he was or where the few photos of the boy that remained were. She recounted that she had taken so many pills and doses of whiskey over the last 30 years that she no longer remembered the boy's face. Those words hit James hard. Today, he would be about his age. Did you ever see him passing by here one day? Didn't you? James couldn't contain himself and hugged his mother. He cried silently on her shoulder. She also cried, with her face pressed against the doctor's chest, who, not knowing that he was indeed her son, whispered in her ear, "Yes, I did meet him. I will tell you to be at peace because he forgives you. He forgives everything, and he loves you very much." The woman didn't know if the doctor was saying that just to console her or if the universe really had its mysterious ways of acting, and he had indeed known her son someday. Either way, the woman hugged the doctor even tighter, as if he were her lost son himself. Days later, James's mother agreed to check into a rehabilitation clinic as a first step to finally change the course of her life. The clinic was quite expensive, and the woman didn't understand why that doctor cared so much about her. She preferred to accept the offer, interpreting it as a sign, a chance to survive. The woman asked if she would see the doctor again after rehabilitation. He promised that if the rehabilitation worked and she got rid of her addictions, she would see him again. Besides, he would make a point of contacting her son and arranging a reconciliation meeting between the two. The woman smiled and cried at the same time, a mixture of feelings that James had never seen. On the day of admission to the clinic, the woman was at peace and determined. Before entering, she took an old photo out of her bag, an image of little James already quite worn out by time. The woman looked closely at the photo and kissed it gently. "I enter here as one person and will leave as another. I will do everything to find you again, my son," she whispered softly, already holding back the tears. For a second, he thought about revealing right there that he was her son, but as a good doctor he knew that the best for his own mother was to make her face that approval of cleansing the body and mind. He said goodbye to the woman, who signed back in his direction, and then entered the clinic with his head held high. At that moment, the young man was sure that it was only a matter of time before he and his mother became a real family. And that made him feel more complete than ever. If you enjoyed the story, click here to leave a like. And this other video that is appearing on the screen now will probably move you too. Enjoy, and see you next time.